Harimi, harimi, al tirai, harimi, al tirai. Imri le'arei Yehuda, hinei Elokeichem. Harimi, harimi, al tirai.
Hello, we're continuing with Derech Hashem, and we're on page 636, which is Chelek Daled, Perek Zayin, Os Hey, which is 475. And today we're going to be talking about the meaning of the Jewish holidays. So today we're not going to be going into the specific Jewish holidays, but we're going to be talking about the different, in general, the spiritual elevation that happens on the Jewish holidays. And this makes sense as we just finished talking about Shabbos, about how Shabbos is a day in the year, is a day during the week where we have an infusion of spirituality, that most of our time spent on earth is mundane. We're in a physical world. But Hashem put into the world certain places and certain times where there's an infusion of spirituality, where it's easier to get close to Hashem and to fulfill our spiritual mission. And that makes it so we don't forget our true purpose in life, which is spiritual in nature, is to follow the commandments of God and to be successful in spiritual matters. So after Shabbos, the Ramchal will now continue to talk about the holidays. V'amnam. Gazra Chachma Hal Yonah, Lahosif Yisrael Kiddush Al Kiddush. Hashem made, He decreed, that there should be sanctification upon sanctification on the Jewish people. V'nasna Lahem Yemei Kodesh Milvana Shabbos. He gave them other holy days besides Shabbos. Shebehem Yikablu Yisrael Madregos the Madregos HaKiddush. That the Jewish people should be recipients of various levels of holiness. Amnam. Kulam Lamata Madregos HaShabbos. However, all of the holidays are on a lower spiritual level than Shabbos. This is something people don't realize. People think, the holiday that comes once a year, like Yom Kippur, it's the most spiritual day of the year. But really, we're seeing that Shabbos is the most spiritual day. Hashpa'as v'kedusha v'hinei kfi madregas hashpa'asam shalayam ma'el, according to the level of the hashpa of the spiritual energy put in these days. So too, a person needs to detach from his physical involvements. So we mentioned last time that Shabbos, because it's such a spiritual day, we detach as much as possible from our physical occupation. We can't become totally spiritual on Shabbos because we still have bodies, we're still physical beings, but nevertheless we have prohibitions on the work and labor that we could do on Shabbos in order that we detach ourselves from physicality. So too on the Jewish holidays, we detach ourselves from physicality according to the level of holiness that each day has. So he's going to explain. So we started off that the holiest day is Shabbos. So Shabbos has the most severe restrictions on work, so that we detach ourselves from physicality as much as possible. And therefore it has the prohibition of work on Shabbos is reflective of its high level of spirituality and spiritual infusion. Now, under that, right under Shabbos, is Yom Kippur. That would be the second holiest day. Now, under that, so Yom Kippur has prohibitions, but it's not as serious as the prohibitions of Shabbos when it comes to work. V'achreim Yomim Tovim. Now, a level below that is the Yom Tov. So Yom Tov, like the first days of Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos, all of those have prohibitions of malacha, of work, but they're not as serious as Yom Kippur and Shabbos. For example, we can cook on Yom Tov. We could do other certain labors, melechas ochel nefesh on Yom Tov. V'achreim chol shel moed. And then we have under that, we have the intermediary days of Yom Tov, of Pesach and Shavuos. There are certain things that are prohibited during the intermediary days of Pesach, of Passover, and Sukkot, that are not prohibited during the week, but it's still not as severe as Yom Tov. V'achreim Rosh Chodesh, and after that we have Rosh Chodesh, Ve'en bo bitul malacha el hanashim, where it's only that women don't work and do certain things on Rosh Chodesh. V'achar kol zeh Hanukkah Purim, and less than that we have Hanukkah and Purim. She'ein behem bitul malacha, there's no prohibition to do work. Ella hodah b'Hanukkah, just on Hanukkah we thank Hashem. V'simcha gam came b'Purim, and happiness on Purim. V'chol zeh, and all of this, kfi erech hasheva hanishba va'or hameru, and all of it is according to the level of hashpa on these days. So we're seeing that the severity of the prohibition of working on different Jewish holidays is directly proportionate to the level of spiritual infusion, of spiritual holiness, of Shefa that God gives on those days. So Shabbos, that's the highest level, which comes once a week of spiritual infusion. So we have the most things that are prohibited. But Rosh Chodesh and Purim and Hanukkah and Purim, where there's no prohibition to do work, those are on a less level, and we're going to talk about what Hanukkah and Purim are all about, God willing, in further subsequent classes. Okay, continues the Ramchal Vav. Ve'ula milvad hakiddush hazeh. Besides for this sanctification, hanisha b'madregaso kfi madregas kiddush hayamim yesh od inyanim pratim yuchadim l'chol zman mizmanim ele kfi inyan. So until now we've just been talking about the general spiritual infusion on these days, but there's also specific topics depending on the specific holiday. B'shorish kulam hu seder shesidra chachmel yonah, depending on what Hashem set it up. Shekol tikun shenitkan v'or gadol sheher b'zman me'azmanim b'shuv tekuvas hazmanahu yeir aleinu or me'ein ha'or harishon. He says that every holiday, in addition to having this general spiritual infusion, has a specific idea that happened on the first holiday, and every time we come around to that time of year, that spiritual energy comes back, the specific spiritual energy. So, for example, on the 15th of Nisan, on the first Passover, we left Egypt, and there was a certain specific spiritual energy that came down to the Jewish people. So every year on the 15th of Nisan, that comes back to the Jewish people. Right? We've mentioned many times that the Jewish holidays are not mere commemorations of events that happened in the past, but rather the same spiritual energy that existed in those days at the original Passover happens on each subsequent year. So we're talking about how there's a general shefa, a general elevation that happens on the holidays, spiritual elevation, but there's also specific ideas related to the events of each specific holiday. And like this, we're commanded on Passover, and everything that we're commanded. To remember the leaving of Egypt. Because there was a great rectification that happened, like we mentioned earlier. So Hashem made it that every year, during that time of year, that rectification will come back like it did originally. And it will renew the original rectification that happened on Pesach. So the original spiritual rectification that happened on Passover happens again every year during Passover time. So we become required to do all of those things. We eat matzah, we don't eat chametz, we bring the korban Pesach when we had a temple, to do all of those things to tap into that spiritual energy. We have a similar thing for Shavuos, where we got the Torah. And Sukkot to remember the clouds of glory. So he's addressing Sukkot, that even though the clouds of glory aren't specifically associated with Tishrei, right? It's a famous question: why do we have Sukkot, which celebrates the clouds of glory, in Tishrei? It should be in Nisan, like Pesach, because that's the clouds of glory surrounded us in the desert when we left Egypt. So the Ramchal doesn't address why we have Sukkot in Tishrei, but this is a famous question addressed by the Tur and also addressed by the Vilna Gaon. You can, if you're interested in those, please. I think we've talked about it before. Please send me a message. We can talk about it. But the general idea is that Sukkot has specific ideas. Shavuos has specific ideas, and Pesach has specific ideas. So in addition to the general hashpah of God's spiritual energy coming into the world, which happens on each holiday, on Shabbos, Yom Kippur, all the holidays, we have specific topics related also to each holiday and specific spiritual rectifications that happened on each holiday. V'chein Hanukkah, v'chein Purim, also Hanukkah and Purim. Derech zeh hayukol yimei Megillas Tainus. There was also something called Megillas Tainus. There were certain holidays, Elish and Batlu, but we don't keep them anymore. Because the Jewish people weren't able to stand it. There were many other spiritual days where there were infusions of spirituality that we don't really have anymore. Except the days mentioned in Megillas Tainus, we don't have to do any commemoration for them anymore, for the arousal of the light that shines in them. He points out, Rabbi Naaman points out on the bottom from someone, that it sounds like the days of Megillas Tainus that we get that spiritual energy without doing anything now. It was just, it used to be you had to do something. Now we don't have to do anything to get it. But okay, so the Ramchal concludes this section, and now in the next section, he's going to, we mentioned that each holiday has a specific idea. So now he's going to go into each holiday and discuss what is the specific idea and the specific mitzvah related to each holiday. He's going to start with Pesach. But now we just discussed in general what is the idea of a Jewish holiday. So we said it's similar to Shabbos, the fact that the Jewish people have that potential for elevation that God puts in the spiritual energy. And we said that according to, there are different levels of spirituality that get put into the day, and that's reflective of how much work is prohibited on that day in order that we detach ourselves from the physical. So Shabbos is the highest, and Yom Kippur, Yontiv, Chol HaMoed, Rosh Chodesh, and Hanukkah and Purim, and wishing everyone a beautiful day.